Hi, I'm Ellie and I'm going to show you around the Water Recycling Centre today. The Water Recycling Centre is the name that we give the place that we clean your sewage up in. That's everything that you flush down the toilet, put down the bath plug hole, or when you have a shower, wash your dishes. All of that dirty water comes to us and we have to clean it up. We have to clean it up to make sure it's safe and ready to go back into a river. And so that's the ultimate recycling. We recycle that water that's all dirty to put it back into the environment so it can carry on being used in the water cycle. So let's go. Here we are at the inlet. So the inlet is where your sewage comes in from your homes. It travels in pipes under the ground from everybody's house and businesses and comes to one of these water recycling centres. Each town and city will have their own water recycling centre. And the sewage comes in here with all the stuff floating around in it. So this is the stuff that you flush down your loo, which I don't think I need to name, but also the stuff that goes down the plug holes, like bits of food from your dinner plates and that through the washing machine, but also stuff that might get washed down the drains in the road. Bits of litter and rocks and stones and things as well. So I'm going to show you the inlet. This is the very first stage where we sieve out that rubbish. We sieve out the large things like the toilet paper, the wipes, the nappies, but even things like false teeth and mobile phones. So hopefully you've never lost one of those down the loo though. This is where the sewage comes in. Big pipes are joined up from all the little pipes coming from people's homes. The sewage comes in and goes to what we call screens. So the screens are quite tricky to see, but they look a bit like the conveyor belts you get in the supermarkets, but ours stand upright. And those conveyor belts are slightly different because they've got little holes in. So little holes, about 3mm. Those little holes mean the liquid can pass through, and the big items like the wipes that I mentioned and the toilet paper, they get sieved out. They get taken up the conveyor belt and then we take them away. Behind me you might be able to see a silver rectangular machine. This is where all of those wipes and things that we sieve out go to. They squeeze the water out and then it ends up in a big chunk. And that big chunk goes into the skip over here. And this is the smelly bit. So this is probably the bit you're glad you're not here to smell. So that big chunk of rubbish you might be able to see in the pipe behind me. There's two big pipes here. All of that rubbish is the stuff that we've sieved out. We squeeze the water out, which goes back into the inlet, and then it ends up in this skip behind me. So this skip has just been emptied today. At Chelmsford, where I am now, we fill up 3 skips every single week. And Anglian Water have got over 1,000 water recycling centres. So you can just imagine how much rubbish that actually is. And unfortunately, this is the only thing we can't recycle. So this stuff does go to the dump.
As you've just seen from Ellie on the tour, we have a massive problem with things coming into the works and getting stuck in our screens, and then they end up in that skip that you've just seen. So here's a little experiment that you can do at home to see what things should and shouldn't go down our toilets and into our sewers that eventually get to our works. So I've just got 3 glasses in front of me. You can use bottles, they'd be ideal, that you can then shake, but I don't have any in lockdown, so here's just 3 glasses. I've filled them with some water, and then I've got some things that end up in those skips. So I've got some toilet paper, some kitchen roll, and those dreaded wet wipes. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put these in the glasses. So in goes the toilet paper, the kitchen roll, and the baby wipe. I'm going to put them in, and then I'm just going to give them a quick stir with a spoon like this. If you've got a bottle, then you can shake them just for 10-15 seconds and see what happens. So there's the toilet paper, hasn't really broken up yet. The kitchen roll hasn't done anything, and the baby wipe. And then what you can do is you can then leave them there for 10 minutes, half an hour, come back to them and then re-stir them, and then see what happens over time and see if they break down, and think about whether these should or shouldn't go down your toilets. Back to you, Ellie.
This is the next stage of the treatment process. This is called the detroiter. So after we've sieved out the toilet paper, the liquid goes flowing along to where it slows down. The solid material sinks to the bottom, and this part of the machine is called the nodding donkey. And the nodding donkey is scooping out all the gravel that's come off of the roads. So this is the gravel that gets washed down the drains when it's raining. The moving part here that you can see is called the nodding donkey because it looks a bit like a donkey nodding, not particularly from this angle, but then you can see it's pushing out the gravel into the skip here. So in here it isn't just gravel, there are other things as well. You might recognise some sweet corn, and the sweet corn is because that passes straight through your body and absolutely nothing happens to it, but it ends up in our skip here. So make sure you eat your sweet corn really thoroughly. Here we are at the next stage of the treatment process. These are called the primary settlement tanks. And the primary settlement tanks, as the name suggests, primary is the first part of the treatment process where we're cleaning that water, actually making it safe to go back into the environment. And settlement, these tanks are 5 metres deep. So they're 5 metres deep and a cone shape at the bottom, which is really, really important. The settlement is where we let all of the solid materials, we just leave it in here. And the solid materials, the organic matter, so to you and me, things like poo, it will sink down to the bottom. It sinks down to the bottom of that cone shape, and at the bottom of the cone there's a pipe that takes it away. And this is a really thick liquid. It's a bit like if you ever make chocolate cakes at home, and that really thick gloopy batter that you pour in the cake tins, it's a bit like that, but it's made out of poo, and we call it sludge. The sludge gets taken off and it's treated later on. Then the top of this tank, there are also bits you might be able to see floating around on the water. There are often grey solid lumps, and these grey solid lumps are bits of fat. So fat and oil that get poured down your plug hole, when they go hard in the sewers, they get washed out and end up on the top of these tanks. Then behind me, there is an arm. This arm floating around is scraping all the fat off the top of the tank. And when it comes around really slowly, it will scrape the fat off to get taken away. Then, at the edge of the tank, there's a metal edge to stop the fat running into the water, and then a concrete edge to run over the water. This is the arm that's scraping the fat off the top of the tank. So you can see this sort of light grey, you might be able to see the darker grey solid lumps as well in the water. This arm is moving around, scraping the fat off and taking it away. There's a metal edge on the side of the tank to stop that fat running over, but the water is allowed to run under that metal edge, over this concrete edge here, and down the side. So this channel down the side is the water that's been in here for about 5 hours, and it's now ready to go to the next stage of the treatment process.
So you've just seen Ellie at the primary settlement tank, and you've seen how all the solids sink to the bottom, and how on the surface you've got that oil and grease. And you may think how that gets there. Well, it gets there through this cooking oil. So it's little bits that have been left on the frying pan that people have just then washed down the sink. Now what you can do is you can just grab a bit of kitchen roll and soak it up and put it in the bin. Or if you like me, you can collect it in a bottle like this, and at some places you can recycle it or then put it or use it for your cooking. But what you can do at home is just see how much of a problem this oil causes. So I've just got a little bit of vegetable oil here. I've got a bowl with some water in, and all I'm going to do is just pour a tiny bit of oil into the bowl like this, and I want you to have a look what happens to it. So as you can see, there's a little bit of oil on that surface, and then if you get a spoon in your kitchen, just stir it around and see what happens to that oil then, and just watch it, give it a quick stir, have a look what happens, then let it settle and see what happens then, and just think about how this oil could then build up and what might happen in your pipes. And that's how it gets to be in those primary settlement tanks, and that's what you could see on the surface of those tanks there at Chelmsford. Back to you, Ellie.
What is this grey-black material? These are rocks. Yep, just rocks. But these rocks are not the important bit, it's what's living on them. These rocks are a habitat for microorganisms. Microorganisms are really, really important to the treatment of sewage. It's how we make the water safe to go into the environment. So, the water is coming around here, trickles down over the rocks, and it pours over those microorganisms living on the rocks. Those microorganisms eat all of the dirt out of the water. Microorganisms that live on the rocks are really, really important. They break down the harmful chemicals that are in the sewage. So the chemicals that are in your wee and the stuff that could be really dangerous in the environment. Those tiny microorganisms clean up the water for us, and it just takes a few minutes to trickle from the top here that we can see the water coming out to the bottom of the tanks, and then it's ready to go to the next stage, which is the final stage of the treatment process. The tanks here are called activated sludge. And activated sludge is quite a good name, but I like to think of it a bit like a chocolate milkshake. But instead of a chocolate milkshake, it's a sewage milkshake. And in our sewage milkshake, we mix the sewage with lots of tiny microorganisms, just like the ones in the biological filters. They mix in with the microorganisms, and then those microorganisms do a really good job. They eat all the harmful things out of the water and make it nice and clean for us. However, this one's slightly different to the biological filters because they live in the water, not on the rocks. Not only do they live in the water, we pump lots and lots of air bubbles in, a bit like when you blow down your straw in your milkshake. And those air bubbles are because those microorganisms are living creatures. And those living creatures, just like you, need oxygen to survive. And those microorganisms then, once they've done their job, from the bottom of the tank, we put them back in to keep reusing them. And they're really, really important part of this process. So remember those learning from home resources, check out the microorganisms. If you're interested in finding out what the microorganisms look like, have a look at the learning from home section. We've got videos on our YouTube channel which show you digital microscope images of these microorganisms. When the water leaves the biological filters, it will all come to one of these final sediment tanks. And the final sediment tanks are just like the primary sediment tanks. They're 5 metres deep, they're cone shaped at the bottom, and the cone shape works in exactly the same way. The organic solids like the soil and the poo that might be left in the water, but this time it's tiny particles, will sink down to the bottom, and that sludge will be taken away from the bottom of the cone to be treated with the other sludge. Then the water will trickle over the edge. And this time when it trickles over the edge into the wheel on the side here, you can see it is lovely and clean. And this water is ready to go back to the river. That's it, clean and safe and ready for the environment. Down here we're at the sludge treatment centre. The sludge is all the stuff, the poo and soil, that's all collected from the bottom of the primary and the final tanks. It then comes down to these buildings, and in these buildings we take that sludge and we make it into a really thick liquid, even thicker, so we can run it through machines like centrifuge, and we can also collect lots of different gases from it. We collect natural gases which we use to generate electricity, and that large white ball is where we collect the gas. We can take the gas, which is called methane. You might be familiar with it because it's the gas that comes out of your bum, especially if you've been eating lots of beans. So just think, from what you flush down the toilet, we get loads of really useful stuff. We get water that goes back into the environment. We get this lovely recycled poo that, I say lovely, it does actually smell quite nice. It doesn't smell bad at all. And we get electricity, which is even better. And that electricity can really help us reduce our carbon footprint. Here we are at the last part of the works. The water comes from the final sediment tanks on the site, and then it mixes together to go out the pipe and out to the watercourse. So from here it might go to the river or straight back into the sea. The final stage, we have to make sure it's safe to go into the river, and we do that by testing the water. So the pipe that you can see pouring back in is the water that's been taken out automatically and tested by machines and going straight back in again. All of the machines are all linked to computers, so we know exactly what's going on. There are some chemicals that can be really dangerous in the river, and we have to make sure it's out of the sewage. All of our machines are constantly running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including the testing, which is all linked to computers. That means if there's a problem, there'll be an alert, and we'll get to know exactly what's going on our site. The water that's been tested goes straight back into the outfall, out to the river. And this water, remember, is going into a river. It isn't drinking water. To make water safe for drinking is a very different process. And you can find out more about that process on our Learning from Home resources. You can also find out how we can check rivers are healthy and have a look at on dipping yourself in those learning from home resources. Remember, this water is going back into the river, it'll go back into the water cycle, and think about those things that you know about the water cycle. It could be water that goes back into the sea, it could be evaporated, it could end up as drinking water once it's been cleaned up again. At Anglian Water, we really care about what goes back into the environment. Making sure the sewage is clean and safe is a really important part of that, but also making sure that the water is there for us in the future, and looking after those environments, the habitats of the creatures and the plants, is key to us as well. Where we live is really special and we do need to look after it. So just think how you can help, and actually how all these machines that you might not ever see are doing this job for us every single day.
Hello, we are very lucky to have with us Polly, and we already have a question. So to start off with, what are the worst and the best parts of your job?
Hello everyone, I'm Polly, so part of my job is looking after about a quarter of the Anglian Water region to make sure the sewage works that you've just seen do what they need to do, which is make the water and the sewage clean so it can go back in the river. The best part of my job is the fact that I love being able to see the difference we've made. So the sewage that comes in has poo and a lot of rag and wipes and nappies to false teeth in it, and it doesn't look very nice, but when it goes back into the river it's really clean and safe for the fish in the river or any children that are paddling in it, so it makes it safe. So that's the best bit, really being able to see that you make a difference. There isn't a part of my job that I don't enjoy. I think probably the hardest bit is on days when it's really cold or wet or snowy, and I worry about our teams that are outside, and are they safe, are they cold, are they warm enough, have they got a warm drink? And that's the hardest part, not being able to be there with people all the time.
We have a brilliant environmental question from Hunsbury Park Primary, and they said, how do you use the recycled poo?
So the recycled poo, the sludge that was at the end of that video, we sell to local farmers. So it's called NutriBio, and it has loads of really good chemicals in it that farmers normally use artificial fertilizers to help the crops grow, to make sure the soil has enough chemicals in, so nitrogen and phosphorus that you need to grow cabbages and corn and all those sorts of things. It's a natural version of that, so we sell it and it gets spread on the land.
Super. We have an interesting question from Scarlett, and they said, have people ever fallen ill from a sewage? So to add to that, how do you keep yourself safe?
So we provide all our employees with PPE, which stands for personal protective equipment. You've probably heard a lot about it in the news recently, because all our doctors in hospitals are wearing it to protect them from coronavirus. And we provide the same for our people. So they have gloves and goggles and face masks for certain activities. And it's very, very rare that people pick anything up, because you're not really touching the sewage directly. And if they are doing, they've got all the clothes they need to keep them safe.
Okay, another question that's just come in. Did you always want to work in water treatment?
So when I was a child, so probably around the age you are now, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I knew that I really liked science and I really liked geography. So once I'd finished my GCSEs at age 16, I did A-levels in my favourite subjects, and geography was still my favourite, so I did that at university. And then after I finished university, I saw a job at Anglian Water, and I applied for that. It was working in the environmental industry, which is what I wanted to do, and I've been here ever since, and I'm happy, and that's really important to me, doing something that makes me happy. So yeah, it's it wasn't a plan, but it's happened, and I'm glad it has.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoy your job. So why did you choose a university route?
I don't know really. I think it's just what I wanted to do at the time. I like the idea of going and carrying on learning. I didn't particularly enjoy like practical style things at school, so I don't think an apprenticeship would have been right for me, where it's more hands-on. I did prefer the classroom style learning, but everyone's
Super.
different.
I think
Yeah.
exactly. We have a question from Arnold Academy, and they said, "Is your job well paid?"
So I think I earn enough that means I can have the lifestyle I want to. Anglian Water are a really good employer, and as well as getting a good salary, we have all sorts of other benefits, which are great to look after your welfare and your lifestyle in general.
Okay, we have another couple of good questions. Have you ever thought about changing your job?
So while I've been at Anglian Water, I've done lots of different jobs, all within sewage treatment. So I guess I have thought about it, and I've done different things just to have fresh challenges. At the moment, I wouldn't consider leaving Anglian Water in the water industry, but I do different things here.
Super. So what upcoming challenges do you think you have within your job?
So at this very moment in time, we're looking at how we can manage the new lockdown that starts today. So that's a current challenge. So there's about 90 people that work under me. So I don't manage all of them, but I manage their managers. So we're looking at how we can manage that current lockdown. But also the winter can be quite difficult. All the microorganisms that live on those rocks that you've just seen on those videos, they don't like the cold weather. And when it gets cold like us, they maybe don't want to work as hard, or they'd rather be somewhere warm. And when it gets colder, it means it's harder to treat sewage. So at the moment, I'm working with my teams to put plans in place for how we're going to make sure we keep treating the sewage to a really good standard over the colder months.
What qualifications do you need for your job role?
So for my job role, obviously I did a degree, but I've got a colleague that does exactly the same job as me, but he left school at 16 and he did an apprenticeship actually at Anglian Water, and he's just learned all those skills on the job. So it doesn't really matter. Like at my level, it's about experience within the workplace, and you can enter and get a job at Anglian Water from 16 and start on an apprenticeship, or you can join with a degree or with experience from other workplaces.
Okay, super. So that was our final question. Thank you very much for joining in, and we've got questions on chat if you've got time afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you.